It has devolved upon me personally, to share in an open letter to the American people. It is concluded, after long years of studious contemplation, that the modus operandi for organizing the most efficacious forms of vital Americana governance is now to be declared to be dependent upon my own up-to-date written communiques, as propitiously designed to be delivered generally en masse to the grand populace as such. This means that I herein am bound to advise any and all such interested parties of critical vested interest per se, that it must be seen as a matter of the utmost importance, should concern citizenry everywhere, to properly poised to take propitious measures for the general welfare, to enact such agencies and avenues by which these ongoing communiques can find a due distribution to the cognizance of those sources and personnel who should request it to be of paramount duty, to engage their necessary involvements in said objectives to protect the motherland. Indeed, all support should be on offer to encourage the continuation of the same, due to the greatest importance lying therein, to wit. It has become incumbent upon me personally to declare for a form of martial law to ensue in these United States under my sole singular discretionary command, because of the fact that it must be adjudged that it is now high time for a most perceptive leader to appropriate the reins of government, in declaring the near total subversion of the once sacrosanct Americana ethos writ large, having now run its course at long last, which has also caused irreparable damage thereby to the overall Republican Federation, and whereby the situation is finally deemed irremediable to salvaging a body politic wholly compromised as it is by ubiquitous corruption on virtually every level and sphere of our government institutions run amok. Indeed, enemy forces have conspired to bring about this planned auto-demolition of all high culture and society, representative of the very reaches of world civilization itself. In fact, so invidiously have such energies run rampant without check, both overtly and covertly, that the damage has fait accompli already been done, and the pernicious effects near complete. It being concluded that only the most stringent measures must be seen as necessary in order to counter, extirpate, and vanquish those treacherous influences from our midst. Our very existence depends upon taking immediate actions to forestall the continuously deleterious consequences being foisted on a republic at large, while implementing crucial measures to effectually reversing course. While ever so slowly the American populace has capitulated and acquiesced as these toxic influences have run riot, incessantly wreaking havoc on the morals and mores necessary to all salutary society and all civilized constituencies germane thereto, we are now faced with the stark reality of having to initiate the most radical measures to counter such foes, and to secure our standing as a matter of utmost survival even. The degradation of our once sacredly held institutions and the concomitant degeneration of our populace go hand in hand so as to divide and conquer our constituencies for a demoralizing stratagem of perverse deformities of persons, for most sinister aims of mass exploitation, wholesale manipulations, and ever so crass commercialization purposes that is quite patently by design. The money-mongering, power-mongering pseudo-elitists are at the vanguard of the assault, having the perverse means to distort and subvert the real nature of things by media propagandists et al., intent on our dissolution. So preoccupied have the electorate allowed itself to become that resistance to these pernicious agendas has become largely a futile prospect. So overwhelmed is the average citizen become in being primarily concerned with protecting his own individual assets. The result of this fatalistic inertia is that the enemy is no longer merely at the gate, but has in fact breached the gate and is now entrenched within the ruling apparatuses and centers of institutional control. So pervasive and normalizing are these tactics of delusion as employed that the average citizen does not realize the seriousness of this wholesale attack upon the fundamental underpinnings of our once highly civilized society. Because of Christendom itself having been subtly undermined by such duplicitous motives, conducive to promoting hedonistic rights and lifestyles, they have worked its mass corruptions to the detriment of all that is most wholesome and good. As a consequence, a consuming evil now proliferates like a cancer, intent on destruction of all healthy organs within the various bodies politic. Therefore, we witness an ongoing spiritual warfare threatening to break out in diametrical opposition between the forces of light and darkness. Accordingly, we must needs anon wake from our seduction and ignorance, seize the day by inaugurating a wisely devised avant-garde thrust to effect a proper coup de grace if we are to salvage our most worthy gains, and check the blight that portends our annihilations as a people and as a species. This means we must declare war against these antithetical minions intent on our destruction as a nation. Should we fail to grasp the severity of our neglect, to take the bull by the horns in this regard, in allowing so injurious a fate to take its course, we then stand to suffer the adverse repercussions, implicating ourselves as passive contributors to the imminent demise of our very way of life. No other course will suffice at this critical juncture, and further hesitation will only compound our predicament, ultimately ending in irreparable catastrophe. Nor is reform any kind of viably effective option, as being anything more than a pie-in-the-sky fancy proposed by those primarily interested in maintaining their sordid controls, which factor can only seal the deal to our own chagrin and utter regret. Mark my words here as prophetic, so it will be realized that it is indeed I alone among my fellow countrymen who is wise to sound the alarm and call for, nay command, vital militias to be reborn and come to the fore, under the banner of comprising a necessary revival of a continental army, in order to ferret out the insidious enemies to our most precious commonwealth, in taking action to secure our borders and protection. I thus advise that the proper sine qua non, cure or panacea, for procuring this historical imperative is the creation of an interim directorate toward consolidating such forces under a single personage most worthy to be duly recognized as the de jure federal head most qualified to represent the propitious ideals while possessing the necessary intelligence and competence to organize so efficacious a thrust. Inasmuch as it is I myself who now go on record in promulgating this call to arms, it behooves me then to aver that it is indeed I myself am also your most able advocate, critically needed to inaugurating and achieving the successful countermeasures against the myriad ruinous insurgencies infiltrating and infecting our prodigious corporate fraternity. A ranking hierarchy is indispensable to this task, which only I alone can properly organize. Only I am duly recognized as most imperative to being so installed. I thus make the statement: no other alternative exists to mount a so decisive and offensive. American government is now technically fait accompli, obsolete as we've known it, and the time has come for a new paradigm shift for us to chart a more prosperous future. By nothing less than our future welfare is at stake here. To refuse this plea for the erection of a capable political platform, or otherwise remain defectively recalcitrant, is to then prove yourselves complicit in your own demise. Hear my words, all true patriots and gentlemen. Now is the time for all good men to come to the aid of their country. The wealthy classes, bureaucrats, party officialdoms, and affiliates, which enclaves have long evinced that they themselves are very part and parcel of the problems that afflict us, along with all their relatively skewed legal practitioners, are herein decreed extremely culpable, and so must be apprehended and prosecuted. And by being held doubly accountable for their shameless violations of all propriety, vis-a-vis the public trust, all bets must be declared off, with properties and assets confiscated from these treacherous brands of criminals long habituated to oppressing the masses for their avariciously gluttonous lifestyles, held per untold litanies and machinations of thievery at the expense of the citizenry. Such a campaign to restore a universal sense of propriety necessitates for confiscatory politics to thus ensue, pursuant to establishing a more equitable form of distributionism, based on true merit and proprietary needs as the best investment overall. Because the whole systematic fraud of governments in toto and across the board has grown ubiquitously and woefully deficient, with an infinite number of improprieties and injustices at its hands, therefore the entire order demands for complete overhaul of its ipso facto invalidated legal credibilities. This means that all three branches of governance must needs be understood to be unequivocally, finally, null and void as any kind of legally legitimate entities worthy to exercise powers over a subjugated populace, especially in that these enclaves and nuclei have insidiously consolidated the same, using the most despotic and tyrannical means. Such moot superstructures demand that they be supplanted with more proprietary agencies, and at any rate circumvented as wholesale travesties, shown to be fully incapacitated by either ineptitude and gross abuses of power. The most The most exorbitant expenses are employed to cover up such deleterious aberrances, per a myriad misinformation and window dressing types of artifice to befool the also morally culpable acquiescent public. Enough already. We must expose the fraud before it is too late. You have been now duly warned. Such investitures of office I hereby affirm to be singularly most fully encapsulate. Mark Americanus Rex King de jure.
Is that it?
That's the first part.